what we are doing today and what resources we have and how we're utilizing it. We have three wonderful speakers here today. We have Alexis Briggs, who is an attorney at Pier 5 Law under Tony Sierra. She is the Bay Area Normal Women's Alliance community organizer and is also the attorney for Occupy UC Davis, which we all know is the school that got sprayed. She is their attorney. She's the attorney for Santa Cruz Occupy and also for Anonymous. So Alexis is going to be our first speaker. We then have Kelly Coulter, who is the founding coordinator of the Normal Women's Alliance first international presence, which is Canada. She has recruited and organized women from Toronto to Vancouver and essentially has a presence across the entire country. She managed to establish the Normal Women's Alliance of Canada to be the Grand Marshal of the Global Marijuana March earlier this year, which has a presence of 40,000 people, which, for having started the Normal Women's Alliance less than a year ago, is a pretty big feat, I think. Lastly, we have Danica Nobel, who is a graduate of Georgetown Law. She was the president of the first SSDP chapter at that school and was also voted most likely to legalize marijuana in college. She's an attorney and young mother in Seattle and is also the Normal Women's Alliance community leader. She is very involved in the campaign for I-502 and is going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. So just to go over a little bit, the Women's Organization for National Prohibition Reform was founded in 1929 by Pauline Sabin, where her and 24 of her society friends created a platform for women who realized after 12 years of alcohol prohibition that it was not working, their children were not safer. In fact, they were in more danger because there weren't any regulations for these saloons that were underground. So she was an heiress, a socialite. She came from a lot of money, very politically connected. And she pulled all of her socialite friends together. She was also a Republican. She was founder of the Women's National Republican Club and was very involved in the women's suffrage, which took place a few years earlier. So some of the tactics that they used back then were, one of the things they were very strong about was being nonpartisan, and they did everything they could to avoid any kind of partisan bickering, excuse me. They took the tactics of the WCTU, which is the Women's Christian Temperance Union, and they were the ones who pushed for alcohol prohibition in the first place. They essentially turned their arguments on their heads and said, exactly, home protection, children, families, and alcohol prohibition was a danger to all of that. They did a lot of lobbying and candidate accountability. They generated a lot of publicity on the paralyzing and demoralizing effects of prohibition. They distributed literature, made speeches. After 5 years, they had over 1 million women joining their group from all social classes, all economic statuses, all political ideologies. But a lot of their leadership was made up of these socialite women. They had a declaration of principles, which we also modeled, and the WNPR is how we modeled the Normal Women's Alliance when it was formed in January of 2010. It seemed to be, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. This organization was very successful, utilizing the resources that they had, and there's no reason that we can't do the same thing. Let's see, what else? So one of the things that we're doing today, which are some of the same strategies, while we don't have a group of politically connected socialite women whose parents and grandparents served as secretaries of departments and advisors to the president, we do have a lot of very committed, very educated, and inspirational women that are coming together to organize and build awareness for women's issues and marijuana prohibition and ending marijuana prohibition and the unique aspects of marijuana prohibition on women. We do a lot of grassroots organizing, we do volunteer donation-based efforts. However, it doesn't cost anything to join the Normal Women's Alliance. Anybody can say that they support it. You're a woman, join us on Facebook, follow us, donate if you feel, but if you agree with what we're doing, you're a normal woman. So that's essentially the beginning. I'm going to go into questions since we are very pressed for time and have a luncheon to go to after this. But I would like to start with Danica, who is involved with I-502 and is getting together with their campaign and is seeing a lot of on-the-ground work. So Danica, there is virtually no gender gap in support for I-502, which is a very new phenomenon. We've always statistically been 10 points behind in public polling when it comes to women's support for legalizing marijuana. And I was wondering why you think that was and what particular aspects of the campaign are resonating among women.
Thank you, Sabrina, and let me just say it's great to be here. It's my first time speaking at a NORML conference, and it is an honor and pleasure to share the stage with these women and all the people who have been up here before us. As far as the I-502 campaign, it is essentially run by women over there. All the actual capabilities are women. And I think they've had this idea in mind that when it comes to actually getting these things passed, that you really need the women, young soccer mom vote. So they've had that in mind the whole time. And so their campaign has been targeting in a very focused way, outreach about why this is important for families, why this is important for children, why this is important for communities. And I think that that message is really resonating. Not too long ago, maybe a month ago, it was in August, they did run a commercial on television, and it was just a young conservative mom saying, you know, I just want to have a conversation about this. And I think that message really resonates. I know it resonates with me. And the idea is, if democracy works at all, if democracy stands for anything, then I think we should be able to say, this is a clearly failed policy, and it's wasting billions of dollars, and we don't want to envision a society that puts money into prisons, not into schools. So if we can't have a conversation because of a taboo or a stigma associated with this movement, then democracy doesn't work. So this, just like the NORML Women's Alliance, this I-502 campaign has tried to shape the stigma and just have a conversation. And I think they've been successful.
Thanks, Danica. Next, I would like to go to Kelly, and I'm wondering, you have been very enthusiastic about really copying a lot of the imagery from that the women of WNPR were utilizing back in the 1930s, and you're really incorporating that today into a lot of the campaigns that you're producing. So I was wondering if you could go into a little bit more detail about what types of events and campaigns, what are some of the strategies and tactics that you have incorporated into your work with NORML Women's Alliance Canada, and why you think those are the ones that are going to work.
Great, thank you. The women of WNPR were very strategic in that they identified the wet politicians from the dry politicians and then directed the vote accordingly. In Canada, we have a unique opportunity. We right now have a conservative majority government. Canada is in trouble because of that. They've just passed mandatory minimums, which will be implemented this November. You're going to see a lot of farmers, cultivators going to prison. And then coming in 2014, medicinal licenses for personal production grows and designated grows will be pulled back, supposedly. We don't know for sure, so you might be seeing patients going to prison. So we are in trouble. But we also have a unique opportunity in that we are going to have a federal election in 3 years. So during this time, we are very vehemently going after the politicians on their position in regards to cannabis law reform. The Liberal Party of Canada recently passed a resolution for tax and regulation. We're holding their feet to the fire on this. We are nonpartisan. We are also speaking with the New Democratic Party. We speak with politicians every month. Every single month we have an appointment with an MP. I see the difference between Canada and the United States is that we have easy access to our politicians, and we encourage all of our women to create relationships with their MPs, which is the federal level. So in that regard, that is how we are replicating the Women of Encore.
Thank you. Alexis, now you are the Bay Area Normal Women's Alliance Coordinator, and as everybody in this room is well aware, it is a hotbed of seasoned marijuana law reform activists. I'm wondering what types of events and campaigns you have been a part of with the Normal Women's Alliance in the Bay Area, and what, if any, challenges you've had organizing women in such a hotbed of seasoned reform activists.
Thank you, Sabrina. The key for us is that I think one of the ways in which this time period for women organizing differs is that we're no longer just the daughters and wives of powerful people, as Danica is pointing out with the Washington campaign. We ourselves are in positions of power. We ourselves are advisors to people. And so we are able to speak directly. Some of the challenge in the Bay Area is that there are so many strong voices already. And so some of the key for us has been trying to figure out how best to tap into that, to be a network, to get the people who are already engaged in cannabis activism to reach out to the non-marijuana activism in the Bay Area. Because it's not just cannabis activism in the Bay Area. We have the Drug Policy Alliance, we have All of Us or None, we have Legal Services for Prisoners with Children, we have all of these nonprofits that touch on all of these other areas that we're pushing on. And it is, again, much like what was going on in Prohibition, of trying to be active cannabis advocates in whatever place we find ourselves. Because, again, we are at non-cannabis events in positions of power with credentials and respect and educated opinions. So one of the things was there's a National Pops and Moms event, which was, I think, one of the strongest events we've had so far. I met LaTanya Lindsay, who's been working at Oaksterdam for quite a while. And she's been a huge resource tying us into being able to make use of the space that Oaksterdam Student Union already has available. We'll be having a joint event with the Canada NORML, which Kelly has set up this Tuesday to show a movie called The Union. But that first event, because it was about bringing mothers and cops together, it was right after the DEA raid. There are a lot of mothers that were impacted, losing their jobs from Oaksterdam, losing quite a bit from that process, and having members from LEAP speak, having someone from Legal Services for Prisoners with Children speak to create a space within Oaksterdam for nonprofits that don't normally come to that venue. And that's something that LaTanya and I are trying to do more often, trying to invite people who are not already engaged to come into an environment where we have all of these educated, well-spoken cannabis female activists already in the Bay Area. The last thing the Bay Area needs is another series of weekly meetings, and so it's really trying to get people that aren't already showing up to those meetings aware of how their issues key into the membership bases that are already there and active.
Thank you, and I would say that's definitely one of the themes and points that we try to stick with at the Normal Women's Alliance, is reaching out of our comfort zone and going into communities and addressing people that we don't usually interact with. They are not marijuana legalizers, but we do share overlapping issues. Maybe not all of the same problems, but marijuana prohibition is one that everybody has a conflict with. So I would like to go through all of you guys and ask each one what kinds of organizations that are not typically thought of are you guys contacting and reaching out to try and get involved with marijuana reform? And anyone can start.
Well, my journey on this, in response to Sabrina's question here, I'm just going to take it from a really personal perspective. I was a marijuana activist in college and in law school, and then I took a job with a federal judge and then became a federal attorney, and I'm still a federal civil prosecutor for a federal agency. So I kind of went undercover for a while. And then it was stories like the NPR story about the millions of dollars spent to go undercover in Florida schools to bust high school kids for marijuana. They all pled, nobody went to court. The state declared it such a success, they doubled the money. These are kids who will never get federal funding, who will have this felony on their record. I was like, what a fail. And then I heard Daisy Brown's story through the NORML Women's Alliance Twitter feed, and I was like, that is it. I'm coming out, I'm stepping up, I have to get involved. So for me, there were both personal and professional things I had to get in order. Professionally, I wrote a long letter to the Washington, D.C. headquarters of my agency asking to take on a role with the NORML Women's Alliance. And it took 45 days, but they have endorsed it, and I can now be the Washington coordinator for NORML Women's Alliance. So honestly, that's the first place that I've started reaching out to non-typical organizations. I work in a giant 32-story federal building which houses 24 different federal agencies. And that's a place that I can meet people, and that's not exactly a place I can campaign, but it's a place that I can get the conversation started, and so that's been one place. And then personally, I am a step-parent to a 15-year-old and a 16-year-old. We have a 1-year-old at home, and I've got a baby on the way. So with the step kids, and they're just our kids, we're half on, half off with their mother and other stepfather. They are recovering addicts. They are in AA and different kinds of drug counseling and intervention groups. And so 2 weeks ago, I set up a meeting with all the parents and said, you guys, I'm going to become more public and more involved in what may be a controversial issue, but it's something I feel really passionate about, and I'm ready to have a conversation with you because I think I'm on the right side of this. I know I'm on the right side of this. And so in having that conversation, it didn't go down the way I thought it would. It went much better. And so that's another place. Their organizations, their kind of drug intervention organizations, they're interested in how I-502 and marijuana law reform can be a better and a safer and healthier alternative. So that, I would say, is the second place that I've reached out to non-typical organizations.
Wow.
Okay, so I don't know if this qualifies as speaking with other organizations, but our current campaign, and this is we're participating with the event at Oaksterdam with the NORML Women's Alliance, is that we've taken a film called The Union, and we've been screening it in alliance, or sometimes partnership, sponsorship if you will, with political parties. So our first screening was in Montreal, and the Liberal Party of Canada sponsored that event. This is significant. This film is an educational tool. The first screening took place on Parliament Hill, where senators and MPs were present, and a few of the senators said that they would not be able to stay for the entire movie. They stayed for the entire movie. And they were impressed. So it's a tool that we're using to educate people, and it's working. Our second event was in Halifax. It was sponsored and paid for by the New Democratic Party. These are federal parties that are paying and partnering with us to educate people about cannabis law reform. So this is exciting for us. Our next event at Oaksterdam will be in Vancouver after that, once again with the Liberals, and we intend to continue with this campaign using film, which we think is a good tool. We think it's not like we're asking them to endorse what we're presenting, but we're asking them to participate in a discussion. And we always have a Q&A, and it's an opportunity to meet with politicians face to face. And the union, fortunately, is just it knocks them out. It really convinces people it's time to end this terrible law.
Well, I mentioned a few earlier. I think another one is the LGBTQ community, particularly in San Francisco. There's two big crossover points. One is the sense of outing yourself as a cannabis user in some way. In the same way, not perhaps in the same way, but in a way in which the two groups can identify with one another about outing yourself about a lifestyle choice or view. The sense of sort of the destigmatizing is really the point where they cross over. That they are being told that they should be ashamed and starting to fight back against that. The other is with the DEA raids. One of the first dispensaries in San Francisco to get shut down was one of the first dispensaries that opened, and it was to serve AIDS patients. This is also a key crossover, and as we see from the relationship between Obama and the Hollywood industry, they obviously, the LGBTQ community, although much like us has a long way to go, has certainly made some strides in getting these issues heard and addressed. So there's a crossover, I think, there. For me, on the more personal note, would be the crossover with Occupy Anonymous, and some of what brought me to pick up those cases in the first place is the Occupy is sort of the verb of going out and demonstrating and taking to the streets and flexing our democratic power for a multitude of issues. But the actual ability to be present on the street, and what they're seeing with the police reactions is they say to me as we're in court, can they do this? And I smile and say, welcome to the American drug war. This is what they do to our clients. But my clients, by the time I explain what they've done, they look at my client and say, oh, well, he's a criminal or she's a criminal. But with these Occupy incidents, you know, pepper spray being one of the many, many, many examples recently, is that it's a lot easier for their communication about the over-militarization of our police force from the position of an activist. And that over-militarization is a direct result. It's been funded by and authorized for the enforcement of the drug war. The drug war paid for the batons that are hitting protesters in the heads right now. They're paying for the tanks, they're paying for the drones, they're paying for everything. The other is Anonymous, similarly. And they're protecting our freedom of expression on the internet, our ability to communicate and educate one another. And in both of those, it wraps up, too, with the issue of people of color, is that this movement is largely Caucasian, and we are not the largest percentage of those negatively impacted by the drug war. So talking to participants in Occupy, people that have been arrested for allegedly participating in anonymous activities, some of what I talked to them about is how often cannabis is being used as the reason to instigate their arrest for their search warrant. The aroma of marijuana wafting out, or I saw a joint in their hands. And we see this in New York, that marijuana arrests are the tool that NYPD is using disproportionately to incarcerate people of color, mostly young men of color. So the crossover of that, the prison industrial complex, the Occupy movement, the anonymous movement, they really frequently are feeling as if they have much bigger fish to fry. And so discussing with them where the resource and funding and what makes these officers think they can get away with this. Well, the drug war has approved these behaviors by law enforcement over and over and over. But they are now in a stronger position to advocate in public regarding how incredibly violent and prejudiced law enforcement has become, and how much taxpayer dollars are going to repress political activity.
Okay, I have one more quick question, and then I want to open it up to Q&A because I really like the interaction with the audience. how has each person been received since becoming a representative for the Normal Women's Alliance? Has there been enthusiasm? Has there been resistance? What has been your experience with organizing? We have groups all over the country, from Minnesota to Texas to Washington to Virginia, all across the country. So I just want to know what kinds of experiences and interactions you've had as organizing for the Women's Alliance.
I'll go real quickly. Briefly, it's been overwhelmingly enthusiastic. The sort of nuts and bolts of it, I think that there's been some growing pains on figuring out what role, and this is the Bay Area issue, what role Normal Women's Alliance plays. And so that's been a process of trying to sort of explain that it is an amplification, not a segregation. It's not trying to duplicate. It's just trying to keep all of us from working at either dual purposes or making sure that we're sharing resources. So in general, it's been an overwhelming, this is fantastic, how can I help?
Yeah, I think personally, because I was already working with NORML Canada prior to the Women's Alliance, I have to say I think the women of Canada were absolutely so ready for this. And actually, I have to correct you, Sabrina, we have representation from coast to coast to coast in Canada, which means the Yellowknife, the far north. So, and these women are, I wish they were here. They're here with us in spirit because they are fantastic. So, yeah, they were ready for it. You know, we have a different voice, and a lot of the women that I was working with prior to the, the Women's Alliance, they were the real leaders in Canada in the sense that they had the businesses, they had, their passion was outstanding. They're beautiful, and I'm so glad to be here.
Getting started up there in Seattle, which feels a little awkward because in Seattle you would think it would just be kicking ass. Anything having to do with marijuana. But the Normal Women's Alliance is off to a good start. Our first meeting had 1 person. Our next meeting had 5 people. And while I've been sitting here today, I've gotten emails from 12 people who want to come to our next meeting. And in one way that I felt really welcomed is in Seattle with all the events that have been there. Hempfest. I spent a day at Hempfest at the NORML booth. Great. It was fabulous. Met a ton of people. I got asked to host a booth at the High Times Cannabis Cup in Seattle. Yes, I would like to do that. And I got to speak on a panel there, and after that, I got a number of people, just really amazing women. I have met some incredible women who are running some amazing things, and they are just coming out and self-identifying, and it's so exciting. So we're just ramping up, but it has been really exciting.
Yeah, I've definitely found the same kind of response. It's been very enthusiastic, and I think one of the reasons that is because we try to create and cultivate a very inclusive, nurturing, protective environment. We come from a very maternal perspective. We're all looking out for each other. We're trying to elevate each other. Some people are new to the movement. They're just dipping their toe in the water. So we kind of bring them in and nurture them and prepare them for some of the insanity that they might eventually come into contact with being in the marijuana reform movement. But in the main thing is just the sense of sisterhood and camaraderie and nurturing. And I think that's what a lot of women and even men really appreciate and resonate with, because it's important when we're all fighting a fight that not a lot of people in the mainstream agree with, more and more coming around, but a lot of women and all activists tend to feel very isolated. They're the only ones doing this because there's not a lot. We also have a project called Sister to Sister, where we try to put women together that have signed up for their interest in getting involved with the Normal Women's Alliance, just to have that, again, a support network for the women. So in conclusion, I think that, we started in January of 2010, and we've come a really long way. We've got a long way to go and a lot of work to do, but It's really exciting to be here, and thank you all for coming. Okay, we've got 10 minutes for questions, and then we're going to ask all of the women in the room to come up and pose for a Normal Women's Alliance picture. So, I see there's already a line in the back.
And I want to thank you for ramping up, because we are inaugurating this ramp, Republicans against marijuana prohibition. On the panel on which I was Thursday, 3 of us were Republicans. This is a Republican issue. Now, if you all are not familiar with the Republican women's group, you're missing out. You need to join them. I'm going to educate you. We have a NFRW, National Federation of Republican Women. When the article in Newsweek, in which my husband and I were quoted, I mentioned it to the president of NFRW, she said, "Ann, why didn't you send it to me? I would have put it on our blog." We are not looked down on those of us who want marijuana reform. Then you have each state has Texas has Texas Federation of Republican Women. Do you know that 5 years ago, when we were trying to do some legislation in Austin, I had 3 Republican women's groups pass a resolution in support of this very minor bill, but it's in support of medical marijuana in Texas. 3 Republican women's groups. Where are you all? I urge you all to find one where you are and join them. Now, there's another group that I have not worked with before, but I have not heard it mentioned. I have not practiced by walking there. This is supported on this issue in the past, and that's the League of Women Voters. I used to belong. The dues went a little bit high, and I paid enough dues to Republican women's groups, I dropped mine. But I'm going to go back to the League of Women Voters. That's a group we should all infiltrate. They need to get there. We need to get our voices heard there.
Do you have a question?
Yes. What else can I say?
And please see me after the panel. We need to talk.
I don't think that anyone should ask her if she has a question, and she will let you.
She can say whatever she wants.
I'm sorry, I really didn't have a question, but I had to get this information out. I mean, I'm going back to Texas, and I will get Republicans aside. But do you know that there are people from Florida, from San Diego, from Illinois, who are taking copies of this petition, this thing called RAMP? I'm going to try to get all these email addresses, and I don't know where it's going to go. And frankly, I'm a little scared to start something that I do not have the capacity to finish as it should be. So I need help from everybody.
You're surrounded by love, my friend.
I have certainly felt that. I felt the love that you have for Richard. And my friend Alice Huffman, I can't tell you the respect I have for Alice Huffman. She is a woman who stood out and had the courage to stand out and do what's right. And that's what we need to do. We need to do what's right. Because if we don't do right, evil will triumph. Thank you.
My name is Kathy Zamaj-Romy. I'm an RN. I'm retired now. I'm with the Human Solution, and I've been with NORML for many, many years. I came out of the closet when it wasn't favorable in California. I spent 4 years in the RN diversion board because of it. Not for anything that I did at work. My work was never challenged. But my employer, Kaiser, turned me in. And and they said, you're not addicted. There's no addiction. But they used me as an example, and now they're going back after me at my workman's comp. And I want to know how NORML feels about these kind of activities.
I think clearly, in general, NORML Women's Alliance certainly agrees with ACE's view of that. In general, we're talking about a right to our own body. Ultimately, when we're talking about marijuana, we're talking about cannabinoids, we're talking about, even in the recreational formats, we're talking about what someone does to their own body, and if it doesn't affect anyone else, what business it is of theirs to dig into that behavior. And that's a much larger women's issue. And then the employment issue with employment discrimination, I think that's another place where it's not just cannabis patients that are being pushed out of jobs who are being treated poorly. Our unions are being weakened, and our unions are being co-opted, and they are not protecting workers in those situations the way that they were built to. And that's another mechanism that perhaps, as Ann said, we need to be infiltrating with these issues.
Yeah. The NAACP so that we can get to the other people, because yes, it is a racial problem as well.
Thank you. All right, we have time for 2 quick questions, and then we have to come up and take a picture.
All right, my name is Amanda. I'm secretary of NORML ECF. My question is, at NORML ECF, we have something called a WWW, which is a Women, Weed, and Wine event, where we have, because some of the girls live on campus, and if you get caught with marijuana on campus, you get housing, you do scholarships, your whole academic life is ruined. So what we do is we have the girls come back to my place with some other girls that live off campus, and we, drink wine and smoke weed and, just be a women's group. And my question is, how do we get more women involved at the collegiate level? Because, you guys are all, professionals who've been doing it for so long, but I've only been at NORML for a year. So how do we get the younger people to be more active in the NORML Women's Alliance?
Well, that's something that I think has actually been a disappointing challenge. There's a small pool of what I would consider mentor-type women that have been involved in the reform movement for a respectable period of time. And when we started, that's kind of the whole reason we started the Sister to Sister program with Students for Sensible Drug Policy, was for exactly that reason, to kind of reach the collegiate level and get the women involved. But we were also hoping that originally it was going to be kind of a big sister, little sister mentor system, so that the older, more seasoned activists could impart their wisdom on the younger, newer generation of women who are interested in becoming reformers, and them that also sharing kind of their technology, social media skills that they've grown up with the more seasoned activists. So if there's any women in this room that have been involved for a really long time and think you would be a very good mentor to help bring, please stand up and show yourselves, because these are the women that you can talk to and get some information from. And okay, so we have 3 women standing up, and that's kind of it. There's not enough of them to mentor all of the young people. We've had maybe 5-to-1 ratio of seasoned to younger activists, which is kind of disappointing, but also speaks to the whole problem and the whole reason that the NORML Women's Alliance exists, is to recruit and retain, which is what we need.
Yes.
So sign up for Sister to Sister if you haven't already.
If anybody who wants to be Sister to Sister wants to call up to me and give me a business card, I can give it out to the girls that are at NORML ECF. That'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Hey, my name is Stu. I'm also I'm an activist in NORML UCF. NORML is a very male-dominated, what's the word I'm looking for, organization, and it's not always we have amazing women activists. like, because we go through lots of students every year. So to stay, like, to have I don't want to say like an amazing turnout like for women, but how do we like when it is very male dominated, how do we empower women to come into our organization and stay if we have low percentage of women activists for marijuana?
Well, my answer to that would be to actively recruit them, to give them positions of power or influence, put them on the board, make them heads of committees, event planning committees, legislative committees, give them an opportunity to take ownership in becoming part of the reform movement, and respecting them. I think that's also a problem. It's not as bad as I think it used to be, but making sure that you're respectful of the women that are interested in becoming involved and treating them as equals, because we're still dealing with that.
I think another thing that's been really helpful in San Francisco as well is that, you're right, we live in a male-dominated world in general. And so providing at these events, focusing on issues that are important to women, but more significantly, pulling female speakers and presenters so that these women are coming to hear from other women, so that it's not another man talking at them. You do two things. One is you do create these moments where there's more women to serve as an example to recruit women. It is putting them in positions of power. It's showing them other women that have successfully moved from these positions of power into the world of activism, into other professions. As they graduate school, it's this great opportunity to prime them to want to have that same kind of reward in whatever profession they're going into, and to take that into what they're going into. And that they can, become people like Sabrina that find a place at the Washington or DC NORML, and that it did start in college for her.
I wasn't lucky enough to get involved or really even know of SSDP chapters. I found out about NORML my senior year, but it's definitely something that I absolutely agree with.
And were there announcements on campus of this great female activist, and maybe not a cannabis activist, but female activists in general? We have a long, long history. Prohibition, civil rights era. Find women in your community that have set a political example, and women will want to hear women talk about how they, with even less access to resources, have been able to bring about change.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're going to have to end the panel now. I'd like to thank everybody for coming. I wish that we could stay longer and talk about more in-depth topics, but we have to go to a luncheon. If I could ask all of the women to come up to the stage.
There's only one.
Please, let him.
Okay,
Hey,
30
thanks.
seconds.
This is just a moment. Listen, when we opened this conference, that table was dominated by a bunch of old gray-haired guys with suits. Okay? Hats off to them. They've dedicated their lives to what we're all striving for. Now, these guys are also smart. They sponsored the Women's NORML Alliance. And look at the difference of the vibe in this room right now. Look at these sisters. Look at this passion. Look at this dedication. And you know what? There's three groups keeping us from legalization, okay? Seniors, like me, Republicans, and women. So here we go, one part. Right on.
All right, ladies, get up here. Women, come on.
You are really rocking, Carol, and I love it. I'm following your progress. I mean, we've met a couple times. I met you back when you were ad rep at Kush. We met at NC. You were in a booth on a side street.
Yep.
So, but I just love it. I'm so behind you. I'm your friend on Facebook. Follow everything.
Thank you very, very much.
I'm coming into here, so.
have full faces just because you could see me doesn't mean I can see you. Like right there, we don't want no Kilroy shots. So if you just we want full faces. This is history, ladies. All right, everybody. Look at me. Please look at me.
30 seconds.
Hold it.
Oh, they legalize it.
I can't see you.
Oh, no, you have to
It's patience with me and everybody else is getting
Okay. I know. All right.
Everybody, it's luncheon time. Anybody has a ticket for the luncheon? It's down the hall.